welcome to another D&D Stories. I am your host, T the Writer, and this is the show where I sit here in front of a shelf full of gaming stuff and tell you all my gaming stories. Got a special treat for you today because I just finished a D&D campaign, so I've got a whole new campaign to talk about. Finally. I know some of you have been kind of complaining that we're getting away from D&D stories and that I've run out of stories and ideas. And, give me time. I'm caught up. I'm up to date on all my D&D stories now. So more need creating for the show. So I do have to span into RPGs and other things. Otherwise, you wouldn't hear from me for months and months. So here we go. The campaign that I just finished was based off of a module for Pathfinder called The Dragon's Demand. Now, unfortunately, I only had... Well, let's get it into frame. There we go. Unfortunately, I only had 2 players because having moved to Minnesota, I didn't have, a huge reservoir of people to pick from in terms of running a fully fledged campaign, so I had my girlfriend and my best friend. And I have said in the past, don't DM if your girlfriend's a player. Don't DM if your best friend is struggling really hard. But I kind of started thinking, I was like, what if that was all? Those were the only people at the table, your girlfriend and your best friend. Wouldn't that make it a really interesting campaign where the DM kind of favors both of you? And I started scratching my head and, what would that entail? So, of course, this was half experiment, half introducing them to tabletop games because my girlfriend, her name is Bree. Bree has played D&D several times over instant messenger, over forum posts and things where it's just text. She'd never actually sat at a table and played the game quote unquote properly, so she knew a good chunk of the rules and she knew how everything kind of worked mechanics wise, but having a table and a grid and all that stuff with little figs and things in front of her, that she'd not done that before, so that portion was going to be new. And then my best friend, his name is Chris, had never played a tabletop game at all, so we had a forum player and a brand new player, both of which were eager to get started and see what this kind of thing was at. So I had 2 completely new players, pretty much new to the tabletop scene, and I do struggle very hard to make sure that almost all my D&D and Pathfinder and RPG kind of games are set at a table. And I know I've had a bunch of people say, you should run a game on Skype, or you should run a game using OpenRP or this or that kind of program online. People would love it. Well, yeah, but it's not the same. I'm trying to kind of preserve the culture while I'm at it. And I know eventually I'll break and probably run an online game, but for now, just kind of trying to keep the culture alive. And the internet is a powerful tool, and I encourage you to use it, but, doing the face-to-face kind of thing. So I set up, and I've got 2 people, one of which has played D&D and one of which has never played tabletop games at all. So, of course, we sit down and we roll up characters. And Chris, being brand new to gaming in general, or to tabletop gaming in general, asks, what's the simplest thing I can play? What comes with the least rules? He was kind of intimidated seeing all the big rule books. I was like, okay, why don't you be a fighter? There's no magic involved. Your stats aren't going to move around. You can focus more on treasure because, let's face it, fighters are kind of defined by their gear in D20. So I go, just be a fighter. You'll do tons of damage. You'll be hard to hit. You can worry more about treasure than about all the rules involving magic and stuff like that. And he goes, okay, I'll roll up a fighter. So Chris rolls up a fighter named Reese Cuttingham, and it was he rolled pretty good stats. He got 3+3s. He filled in, I did a whole episode about his character sheet. He filled in like every line in his backpack with different things: chalk, candles, a sextant, a crowbar, a tent, supplies, torches, pickaxe, fishing rod, string. He wanted to be prepared. And what else did he get? He got like an iron pot and paper and pen and ink, and he wanted to be prepared to do just about anything. In real life, he works on a farm. He's a very self-sufficient, very, very driven kind of guy. He knows a lot of like worldly things that nerdy gamers like me have no concept of. I go to the marketplace and I buy my food there. He probably could, if the apocalypse happened tomorrow, Chris could probably sustain himself on all of his own skills alone. So he rolls up a fighter, and on paper it's nothing special. I think he got like, what was it? Weapon specialization, axe, and then like snatch arrow or something, or whatever comes before snatch arrow. I forgot, but the fighter's nothing special on paper, but he got enough like weird and random items that at level 1 he could probably handle just about anything. Oh, he got like a saw too. He was very adamant about getting like a hammer, a saw, a pickaxe. He wanted tools for every job, and he had tools for every job. But so he got all that stuff, and he got like a battle axe and a shield and some chainmail, and he was set to go. And then Bree, my girlfriend, decides that, okay, we've got a tank, basically. I'll be the magic user, since there's only going to be 2 of us. So she rolls up a sorceress. And, Reese is, the basic human level 1 fighter. So she rolls like a gnome sorceress, yeah. And being that we're playing in Pathfinder, when you roll a sorcerer, you can pick a bloodline. And a bloodline is basically like however far back in your family your strain of magic goes. That's what the source was. And there's angel, there's demon, there's abysmal, there's elemental, there's draconic. Somebody bumped uglies with a dragon at some point in your ancestry. Just and there's dozens of them. Each one of these books, pretty much, the core rulebook, the advanced player's guide, the game mastery guide, ultimate magic, all of them come with just like 10 more bloodlines. And the bloodline that she picked was verdant, which basically means plant life. And what picking a bloodline does in Pathfinder for a sorceress means that every couple of levels you'll get an ability or an extra spell based on whatever it is. So being verdant, I think the first thing she got was basically like a vine whip ability. She could turn her hands into vines and like Spider-Man through the trees or whatever. She could only do it like 6 times, but per day, but she could like trip enemies. She could use it like a rope and pull herself up. If she was falling, she could shoot the vine out of her hands and then like swing to safety. It was very, very much a utility kind of spell. It didn't say that you could use it as a weapon though, so you couldn't like turn your hand into a vine and like whip crack somebody, which you'd think that would be the first thing people would try to do, but it wasn't listed there that you could use it as a weapon. So it was everything except hitting enemies. You could trip them or like try to tie them up or something, but you couldn't actually hurt anything with them. So, but very useful ability. Later on, she got like photosynthesis sort of ability. She could, if she like took a nap in the sunshine, she only had to sleep like half as long as anybody else. Later on, she could turn herself into a small tree instead of like sleeping a regular 8 hours. She could absorb nutrients and regain a lot more health than normal. and she gained like Tanglevine and a couple of other spells. Like every other level she would get a plant oriented spell, and then every other level she would get like something would add on to her passive abilities or her body. Like if she cast a spell on herself, she would get temporary armor equal to the spell's level. So interesting stuff like that. A far more complicated character than Chris is, but much smaller, much squishier, much much more killable. Let's put it that way. So it was, little Oompa Loompa and chainmail Reese pretty much. And at the end of this campaign story, I'll put up artwork because whenever Bree is like a part of something that she really likes, she does a ton of artwork about it. And at the end of the story, I'll put up all of her artwork and I'll like play the theme song or something, so you can see exactly what these characters looked like. And I think she did like a short comic and stuff too. So however many video parts this ends up being, at the very end, stay tuned after I say, keep gaming. I'll play the theme song in the credits and I'll show all of her artwork because she did a ton of artwork while we were doing this campaign. It was really cool. And so we had Reese Cuttingham, and then Bree decided to name her gnomish sorceress Puck, because when she was in elementary school, she was the first, or maybe middle school, she was the first girl in her middle school to play the character Puck from A Midsummer Night's Dream, the first girl to play Puck. So she kind of had an affinity for the name, so she's like, okay, Puck and Reese Cuttingham. So we've got our characters set down, and we go, okay. And I can already tell that Chris is kind of overwhelmed by all the numbers and stats and things he had to write down. And again, like I always say, if you want to scare somebody away from D&D, show them a character sheet, So I had, having worked with Chris at a hardware store, I had filled his head with all these wonderful stories to serve as a buffer against him seeing a character sheet for the first time. So, we struggled through it, but, like any other first-time gamer, he loved, like, the shopping portion. So he sat with Ultimate Equipment in front of him for, like, almost an hour just picking out stuff. So that made him happy. So he also picked up a deck of cards and a handful of 6-sided dice and things like that. So he had like several activities planned out for himself. It's like he knew there was going to be downtime, so he picked up, the fishing pole and the deck of cards and different things like that. So he was very adamant about building a person, which was very impressive for me because a lot of people I know, when they started D&D, they were like, I want this weapon and this weapon and this weapon, and I want to know this spell. And, they don't think about what's in your bag other than torches, rations, and a bedroll, So Chris was actually far more advanced than the average D&D player tends to be when building their first character sheet. Maybe it's the fact that he works on a farm and he's a very practical guy, or maybe it was just smarter than the average bear. I don't know. But I was just super impressed with how well he filled out his character sheet just from the get-go. He was prepared for adventure. He wasn't just prepared to kill stuff. That's probably what it was for me. What else? Oh, Puck. Puck also grabbed some weird things. Like she grabbed a puzzle box. She grabbed some wood carving tools she wanted to like whittle and different things like that. Like she read the the dogma for gnomes in Pathfinders. Like it's very hard for them to sit still, and it's very hard for them to have idle hands. So they always have things like puzzle boxes, knitting, whittling, jigsaw puzzles. They're always doing something with their hands, and if not, they get nervous. So she she bought like a whittler's kit, a puzzle box, a whole bunch of things to keep her busy, again, during downtime. So both of these people built very good characters, considering this was their first, like sitting at a table, traditional D&D / Pathfinder session. They actually both put a lot of thought into it, and I was super impressed. But, and Reese was like our regular blonde-haired, blue-eyed, Aryan kind of guy. But that's actually what he looks like in real life, so I can't fault him for that. He's tan with like sun-bleached blonde hair and these bright, like, fuck you blue eyes. He's got this giant grin on his face most of the time, so he looked like himself, so I can't get on him for that. And then Puck, being a gnome, had a much wider variety of like colors and shades and hair to look at. So she made, since she was verdant, she made like bright green hair and then orange skin. And it took me a couple of days to see the connection, and she didn't see the connection at all, but I was like, oh, you're an Oompa Loompa. Orange skin and green hair. Oompa Loompa. Anyway, so getting to the actual campaign, we've set down our characters now. We start on, do they start in a tavern? No, they don't. We start out on the Grey Road, which, yes, is the name of the same road from Sunless Citadel, but I just like to reuse names. So, we start out on the Grey Road, where Reese, Cunningham, and Puck have been hired by a guy named Grib. Grib takes supplies into a town called Bellheim. Bellheim is like 300 people. It's a logging / farming kind of town. Nothing really big, but they do need supplies from the outside world. So he's got this big cart and a big Clydesdale horse, and they've got like 9 crates full of random supplies, nails, hammers, anvils, sharpening tools, any, ale, whatever you think a town might need. There was a little bit of everything. It was just like a general supply wagon. And, Bellheim is small enough, they don't need like a whole caravan to come in every month. It's just the one cart. They're a simple, peace-loving folk, and there's not like orcs in the forest that are harassing them every 5 seconds, so they don't need a lot. But, it's a trade caravan, so you've got to have guards so that, the random highwayman doesn't shoot you in the back and take all your stuff. So Grib hires Puck and Reese to just kind of, walk with me, make sure your sword is in view. If you want to ride on the top crate and stare at the trees, that's fine. I'll pay you both, 15 gold. What do you say? And it's like a 4-day journey, because Bellheim is just out in the middle of nowhere. There's plenty of forest, plenty of farmland, and that's pretty much all that's out there. There's nothing important anywhere near here. And so, we start our story, they're like halfway through their journey, guarding this, and they're level 1 characters, so, they're starting out with like a humble little escort quest, and new players at the same time, so, give them room to breathe while you're starting. And so Reese immediately, he's for this, he likes it, so he takes point and he kind of walks alongside the horse, and Puck, I think, rides on the top of one of the crates in like the covered wagon of the wagon that the horse is pulling, and Grib is up front, with the horse's reins, and he's got like a bow across his lap. And what happens? They go on for, and I'm making rolls to see if they run into anything, and I think Reese was paranoid from the get-go, because I had this big grid map that was from another set of something called the King's Road. It was basically a big dirt road that waggles back and forth across this field with a few trees on it, and so I didn't have to draw it, in other words. So I've got the caravan and the horse, and we actually found figurines. Again, Bree's artistic awesomeness working for us. We had a figurine of Puck and Reese, and then Grib as well from like my set, but she went out and she found a gnome sorceress, and we found a guy in chainmail, and she basically got like nail polish paint to and like did this for painting them and making them look just right. So we put the figs down, and we're like, okay, this obviously isn't to scale, so just pretend that this end of the map is the end of your journey, and this end of the map was where we're starting. So it's kind of to scale according to time. And Reese is kind of paranoid because you don't have an escort quest and then not get attacked, so he knows something's up, even though this is like his first game. So instinct tells him they're going to get attacked at some point. So he's like going from like rock to rock, using it as cover, and I was like, you're gonna exhaust yourself pretty fast if you're just kind of darting from cover to cover in chainmail. Are you sure you're gonna be okay? And he goes, yeah, I'll be fine. I just keep doing it whenever there's like a boulder or something I can hide behind nearby, just to make sure I don't just get one shot popped off without seeing my enemy. And I was like, all right. And Puck is just kind of riding leisurely along, watching this guy in chainmail dart from one cover to another, mile after mile, hour after hour. But eventually they do get caught. Or they do get attacked. There's a goblin war party that comes out. And what do goblins in Pathfinder hate? Well, they hate humans and they hate horses. So there's plenty of both to go around. And at the time, I hadn't really thought about it, but the fact that there were 2 party members probably should have entered into my equation somewhere. So they had to fight hard in terms of being outnumbered, because there were like 5 goblins and the 2 of them. And Grib, obviously being the helpless NPC of the group, can't do much other than sit on the cart and like shoot with his bow and arrow, and the horse is freaking out because goblins. So they fight and they fight and they fight, and Puck gets knocked out to 0 HP because when you're a level 1 sorcerer, there's not a lot you can do other than stand behind your tank and pray. So I mean, she had a sling, but she didn't use it, and she had I think like a 1d3, or no, a 1d4 acid spell, but she could only use it like once, maybe twice, and none of her verdant abilities had started up yet, so she kind of got caught between 2 of them. So she got knocked out and just kind of collapsed right in front of the horse, and Reese is going back and forth with his battle axe with this one goblin, I swear to God. And Reese, actually, we helped him build, basically a tank. So at level 1, he had like 18, 19, 20 armor just based on his stats and the fact that he bought chainmail. So the goblin can't hurt him, basically. I mean, unless this goblin rolls a 20, he can't get through Reese's armor. But Reese keeps rolling. He rolls like 5, 9, 2, 3. So there's this, the goblin's not strong enough, just keeps kicking him in the shin, and it's not doing anything. And he keeps swinging his battle axe back and forth, but like maybe the goblin is too small or something like that. And so there's just this epic, these 2 trying to hurt each other, and eventually the goblin just kind of gets bored and starts to just shouts some obscenity in Goblinese, and then turns to basically leave, and Reese caught him in the back. So he had no problem. It's like, you guys, I'm sitting behind the DM screen because the goblin's not strong enough. I just keep throwing d20s, and Reese just keeps missing and missing and missing. I'm like, the goblin's getting bored of you at this point. It's like, because your battle is going nowhere. He turns to leave. I attack him while his back's turned, and finally gets him. So the goblins, with Puck down, the goblins are like getting ready to basically skewer her, because it was kind of my fault. There were way too many goblins for just these two people. And, with the horse being there right next to her, the goblins are like wary of the horse, because horses can step on you if you're short enough. So, and of course the horse is like freaking out and like fighting against the cart and his reins and stuff. So they're kind of wary of the horse, but don't want to leave Puck right there without making sure she's dead. So they kind of run forward to just like skewer her right away. And sorry, got a frog in my throat. And finally Grib gets he's been aiming this whole time, trying not to hit his horse and trying not to hit Puck or Reese, because if you shoot into melee you get serious subtractions and you can accidentally hit an ally. So with Puck down and the horse jittering to one side, it was actually safe to shoot, and he managed to get both of them with his longbow. So Puck was safe, albeit buried under dead goblins, and eventually Reese managed to get the other three. So, crisis averted, but one of our party members is already down. So, what happens then? They pretty much, they gather Puck's limp body and put her up in the cart, and Reese, being that he basically can't get hurt when it comes to goblins unless they roll a perfect 20. He kind of figured that out, I think, because he became a lot braver after that. Reese basically took point, and they continued on, making sure that Puck could rest. So she recovers 1, 2, 3, 4 hit points of all resting throughout the day, and then that night, the boys can take shifts watching over the cart, and Puck can continue to rest. So of course she gets all of her health back. Walk it off, put a band-aid on it, you'll be fine, things like that. And they get attacked a second time by another, or no they don't. That was the only time. I did have to introduce Reese to looting the bodies, because if you don't know about that, you're not going to think about it. So Reese gets like a poisonous tree frog off of one of them, and then a little bit of gold and a little bit of small weapons, things like that. Not a whole ton from goblins. Looks like they were either a scouting party or a war party or something way far out of goblin territory, because Grib does the knowledge local thing and says, wow, there's really no goblins around here. That was really unusual. And really it was just me acquainting them with combat, so they understand kind of how the game works before they get to anything super important. So they got all out on the goblins, and they make it into town. Puck's unconscious pretty much, and swaddled in so many blankets, so she's safe. And they make it into town only to run into the sheriff and his 6 deputies. Bellheim's a town of 300 people, so you don't need a ton of guards. So you've got the sheriff and his 6 deputies stop Grib in the middle of the road before he comes into town. And, the sheriff is immediately suspicious of Grib, because apparently he's been moving things around, in and out of town that he not ought to be. So he goes, you wouldn't mind me searching your crates, would you, Grib? And Grib's kind of pulling on his collar. No, Sheriff, go ahead. And it's okay, you stay there. And, Reese basically gets surrounded on all sides, so he just kind of sheathes his weapon and stands there, because, he's not done anything wrong. He's just following the caravan. And, the sheriff finds, the unconscious Puck laying in the caravan. He kind of moves the thing to one side so we can see the spear wound in her bare shoulder. And they get her, I think he sends 2 of his deputies yeah, it was two of his deputies to take her to like a local apothecary for like a potion or like a first aid kit or something, because she's not dying, she's just unconscious. And the rest of the deputies basically take apart all the crates and make sure there's nothing illegal in there until they find that one of the crates is a lot heavier than it ought to be because it's got like bread rolls in it along with a little bit of straw so nothing like mushes into anything else. And they find that one of the crates has a false bottom in it. And Grib kind of goes, oh god, or oh shit, they found my secret stash. So they're like throwing bread out onto the muddy unpaved road, and they like force the hidden panel in this crate, and they find fel weapons inside. And for those of you who don't know, fel weapons is basically like demon / warlock / necromancer enchantments kind of stuff. So if you have a sword with a fel enchantment on it, it means it does damage as though it were a demon, or as though it were a necromancer, or as though it were a warlock. Bad like dark juju, not something you want to be caught with. When the sheriff is looking through your caravan of stuff, he finds 3 fel weapons. And he goes, well, Grib, you're under arrest. And the other deputies grab him and kind of just drag him off the side of the cart and place him under arrest. And they take him to the local jailhouse, and later on he's in the stocks, like in the middle of the town square, with a sign on him that says, peddler of fel weapons, so, people can pelt him with tomatoes or beat him with sticks or whatever they want to do, pretty much. He's got to stay there for a week, basically. Well, not in the stocks, but you know what I mean. He's going to be there for a while, and then he's going to be in jail for a long, long time. And so Reese is just kind of standing there wondering what to do about himself, because Puck is kind of at the healer at the hospital, and his boss just got caught with illegal weaponry. And so the sheriff kind of turns and like tilts his hat back, and he goes, oh, let me guess. He hired you to help protect his caravan full of perfectly innocent items that were coming into Bellheim. And Reese goes, yeah. And he goes, what's your name, son? And Chris in real life kind of panics. And I don't really know why, because the sheriff wasn't like being super aggressive or anything. He could tell that Reese had no part in this. And Chris goes, I give him a fake name. And I'm like, you do? And he goes, yeah. I'm going to tell him my name is... And he kind of paused, and I could see his eyes going back and forth while he was trying to come up with a clever name. And he goes, my name is Tom. And I didn't make the connection for about 2 months, but apparently the reason he chose that name was Tom and Puck. Ah, very clever, Chris. That went right over my head, and I don't think he realized that went over my head, because he never actually said anything about it. But recently, Bree was telling me that it was, from the sheriff's point of view, it was the adventures of Tom and Puck. And I was like, oh god, that's so clever. So I didn't catch it at the time, but he told the sheriff his name was Tom. So it could be Tom and Puck. And the sheriff has no reason to disbelieve him. So, there's really no... he's not suspected of anything. So he doesn't really take his sense motive role. He's like, okay, well, Tom, I can tell, and this he never discovered his name wasn't Tom. And he goes, well, Tom, I can tell you've played no part in this. Clearly you were just hired to guard the caravan. So you're a bystander in all this. So I tell you what I'm going to do. Clearly you and your... and he pauses for a second, and he goes, are you and her? And Reese goes, no. And he goes, well, clearly you and your friend got the short end of the stick here. I mean, obviously he's not going to be able to pay you your 15 gold apiece while he's sitting in jail. So what I'm going to do is set you up at the Bounding Bunny Inn for the next 3 nights for free, so you can kind of sort out what you're going to do and kind of recover from this bad business venture. Because I know you didn't do anything wrong. You know, I've got a way about people, that kind of thing. And you know, Tom goes, oh, well, thanks, Sheriff. Is there anything else I can do or help with? And he goes, nah, we're going to move the caravan into town and distribute everything where it's supposed to go, and then, you know, confiscate these fell weapons and make sure they're properly disposed of. And then we're going to have a little chat with Grib to see who in town bought these, you know, demon energy infused weapons and why. Because there are 3 swords here, you know, God forbid you have 1, much less 2. So if there are 3, there might be multiple suspects here. So we're going to have a little chat with him as soon as he's properly motivated. And Reese is like, oh God, they're going to torture him. But, you know, it's none of his business. He's got 3 free nights in the Bounding Bunny Inn. And, you know, Puck is well underway in her recovery. And, you know, she gets like a potion while she's unconscious. And she sits back up and she's fine. So, you know, Reese fills her in on everything that happens. And they take off towards the Bounding Bunny Inn, which is in the middle of Bellheim. And they find out, you know, Bellheim has like 300 people. It's mostly humans. There's like 5 halflings and half a dozen gnomes and 1 elf, and, you know, all the rest is human. There's, you know, it's a human logging / farming village kind of place. So there's not a whole ton that goes on out here in terms of like diversity and magic and things like that. But what does catch the what does catch Puck's eye is that the bartender is also a gnome. So she goes to chat with him because it's unusual for gnomes to like stop somewhere outside their own villages and things. So she goes to like kind of chat with him, and he's very flirty, of course, because most of the other gnomes that live in town are like way beyond old. So he's like the youngest gnome in town, about her age, and she, you know, she's a cute, strong adventurer who just kind of suddenly wanders into town. Oh, there was flirting. So Reese wanders off with like his deck of cards, and he goes to like gamble most of the night away with a group of local farmers, or a group of, you know, the blacksmith and the farmer and the farmer's son, and, you know, one of the guys that was working in the kitchen at the Bounding Bunny Inn and Tavern. So he's over there like making a few gold pieces, and Puck talks with the bartender for a while, and eventually they go up and they get separate rooms, and they head to sleep for the night. And that is where I will stop for this time. I guess I'll arrange this as the sessions went. So they kind of head to sleep. You know, they gain a level, they're going to do some shopping, etc., etc. So we do that between sessions. So that is where I will stop for now, and I will see you guys on the next portion of this D&D story. Keep gaming.